Hello and welcome back to Better Know a Poet. Today, E is for Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson, of course, is most famous for being the father of American Transcendentalism, but in addition to a leading luminary in American philosophical history, he was also a very great poet. Not just a poet, but a very good poet. So we're going to look at one of his poems today. So let's learn about Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson was an American lecturer, poet, and essayist, the leading apostle of New England Transcendentalism. Emerson was born May 25th, 1803, in Boston, Massachusetts. His father was the Reverend William Emerson, a Unitarian clergyman and friend of the arts. His mother came from a strongly Anglican family from England and influenced her son through writers such as Ralph Cudworth, Robert Leighton, Jeremy Taylor, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. At the age of 9, Emerson entered the Boston Public Latin School. In 1817, at the age of 14, he entered Harvard College, and upon graduation in 1821, started teaching while attending Harvard Divinity School part-time. Emerson was licensed to preach as a Unitarian in 1826, but was not ordained as a minister until 1829. This same year, he married Ellen Louisa Tucker. Her tragic death from tuberculosis only 2 years later caused him to seriously question the Christian beliefs in which he was raised. This loss of belief was only exacerbated by his brother William, who brought with him from Germany the new higher criticism, biblical exegetic, which cast doubt on the veracity of the miracles described by Scripture. Assailed by doubts both intellectual and existential, Emerson resigned from the ministry in 1832 and then left the church completely. He discovered the beginnings of his new philosophy on a trip to Europe, where he had important conversations with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, William Wordsworth, and Thomas Carlyle. In 1834, he settled permanently in Concord, Massachusetts. Here, he brought out the writings that would make his name famous throughout the Western world. Before the decade was over, his personal manifestos, Nature, The American Scholar, and the Divinity School Address had rallied together a group that came to be known as the Transcendentalists. The heart of Emerson's philosophy was the idea that mankind had the, quote, ability to transcend the materialistic world of sense experience. According to this creed, God could be best found by looking inward into one's own self, one's own soul, and from such an enlightened self awareness would in turn come freedom of action and the ability to change one's world according to the dictates of one's ideals and conscience. And if you're familiar with English Romantic poetry, you see this idea sort of all throughout it, especially through writers like Byron and through a poem by Coleridge called the Aeolian Harp, which is a very famous kind of description of what exactly Emerson is describing here. In the 1840s, he helped launch the journal The Dial and gathered his essays into 2 volumes. Their publication made him internationally famous. Interestingly, the second volume of this collection showed a moderating of his earlier ideals and attempted to strike a balance between self reliance and respect for society and dependence on his fellow man. This moderation only continued in the writings he produced over the next 20 years. These included his Representative Men, English Traits, and Conduct of Life, 2 sets of poems published in 1846 and May Day in 1867, established his reputation as a major American poet. Emerson's powers slowed in the 1860s, and upon his death in 1882, he was called the Sage of Concord and added to the pantheon of greats he had worked so tirelessly to destroy. However, despite this final waning in the last 20 years of his life, Emerson will be forever known as the man who led his country through the American Renaissance, and as the man responsible for bringing to America the philosophy and aesthetics of European Romanticism. So Emerson, and I didn't even remember this. I must have known it years ago, but had just forgotten. He wrote the Concord hymn, the phrase of the shot heard around the world. That's from Emerson. I had completely forgotten that. But here's another poem by Emerson called Bacchus. Bacchus is, of course, the god of wine and the festivities and the dances and the drunkenness that would take place in celebration of this god were known as bacchanals, so in honor of Bacchus. So this is a great poem by him called Bacchus. Bring me wine, but wine which never grew in the belly of the grape, or grew on vine whose taproots, reaching through under the Andes to the Cape, suffered no savor of the earth to scape. Let its grapes the morn salute from a nocturnal root, of which feels the acrid juice of Styx and Erebus, and turns the woe of night by its own craft to a more rich delight. We buy ashes for bread. We buy diluted wine. Give me of the true, whose ample leaves and tendrils curled among the silver hills of heaven draw everlasting dew. Wine of wine, blood of the world, form of forms, and mold of statures, that I intoxicated, and by the draught assimilated, may float at pleasure through all natures, the bird language rightly spell, and that which roses say so well. Wine that is shed like the torrents of the sun up the horizon walls, or like the Atlantic streams which run when the South Sea calls. Water and bread, food which needs no transmuting, rainbow flowering, wisdom fruiting, wine which is already man, food which teach and reason can. Wine which music is, music and wine are one, that I, drinking this, shall hear far chaos talk with me, king unborn shall walk with me, and the poor grass shall plot and plan what it will do when it is man. Quick and so will I unlock every crypt of every rock. I think the joyful juice, for all I know, winds of remembering of the ancient being below, and seeming solid walls of use open and flow. Poor Bacchus, the remembering wine, retrieve the loss of me and mine. Vine for vine be antidote, and the grape requite the lote. Haste to cure the old despair, reason in nature's lotus drenched, the memory of ages quenched, give them again to shine. Let wine repair what this undid, and where the infection slid, a dazzling memory revive, refresh the faded tints, recut the aged prints, and write my old adventures with the pen, which on the first day drew upon the tablets blue, and dancing Pleiads and eternal men. Fantastic poem, wonderful poem. It seems to partake a lot of the of course the transcendentalism that he basically preached, and the English Romanticism. I feel like this a lot of the Romantic poets do what he's doing here, which is almost pantheistic, right? Saying that in this grape and this wine, we see the ability of the transcendent spirit of man, right? In nature, we find almost the divine in nature, which is something completely from the Romantics, from the period. So, really good poem, and really interesting that Emerson was a poet as well as a philosopher. All right, so that's it for today, and I will see you on Monday.